Today we have an apology from Councillor Lacastra, who won't be joining us. Do I have a mover for that apology? Councillor Vorster, seconded Councillor Young. All in favour? And of course we have granted leave of absence to our Mayor, who's travelling for the city. I'll move on to condolences, councillors, and... Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, we'll all stand for the national anthem. Thanks. Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is good by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts, all beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every state advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair. Please be seated. Sorry about that, councillors. A little bit, I have to do the prayer now. The prayer. God grant that we who would seek to serve you may have the wisdom of your Spirit, the guiding of your hand, and the grace to serve together for the prosperity of our city. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Thank you. And I'm a little off kilter because this morning I have to start the meeting in moving a motion of condolence for some tragic loss of life in our city. I'd like to move that a motion of condolence be passed and a message of sympathy sent to the O'Keefe and Sale families on the passing of Troy O'Keefe and Gabrielle Sales. Seconded Councillor Young. Councillors, the SEQ region has just experienced an unprecedented rain event and resulting floods, and there have been devastating consequences for many, and none more so than two of our own who tragically lost their lives in floodwaters. So, councillors, on behalf of the city today, I'm moving a motion of condolence so that we can send our sympathy to the families of Troy O'Keefe and Gabrielle Sales. We send our heartfelt sympathy on their loss, and I'll take the vote. All in favour? That's unanimous. Certainly, Councillor Tozer. Anyone else? I think we might all sign those messages, so we can all do that. I also have a late condolence of my own to offer this morning. I only became aware of last night, so to the Charlton family of Wharf Road, Pimpamar, I'd like to move that a motion of condolence be passed and a message of sympathy sent. Seconded Councillor Owen Jones. Mel Charlton was a true gentleman of Pimpamar and one of a small number who wore the tag of local legend. The family owned the original feed shop at Oxenford and lived in Wharf Road at Pimpamar for the last 20 years or more. Mel will be sadly missed by his family and the Pimpamar community at large, and we send our heartfelt sympathy to the family. I'll take the vote. Those in favour? That is carried. Certainly. Thank you, Councillor Young and Councillor Hamill. Thank you very much. Okay, there's no mayoral minute, you'll be pleased to know. The confirmation of minutes of the last meeting. Were there any corrections, councillors? Do I have a mover? Moved Councillor Caldwell. Seconded Councillor Tozer. All in favour? That is carried. And the special meeting of council held on Monday the 7th of March. Moved Councillor Young. Seconded Councillor Vorster. All in favour? That is carried. Okay, so now we'll go on to the Mayor's report. Before I start, I'd like to give a shout out to Queenslander Cameron Smith. I don't know if you've caught up with the news this morning, but the fifth major, the Players' Championship, has been won by our very own Cameron Smith. He joins other Queenslanders who've previously won, Adam Scott, Greg Norman and Jason Day. And it's the largest first prize in PGA history that he's been successful in winning. And I'm particularly pleased. He had the misfortune of playing with me in the last PGA event, the Pro-Am that was held here on the Gold Coast, which was highly embarrassing. But what a fine young gentleman, and our congratulations go to him. So great news this morning. And now, moving on to the Acting Mayor's report. I understand that we're all aware of the weather problems that we've had over recent weeks, and the Mayor will give a comprehensive report on his return on the activities of disaster management. But in speaking to what occurred, we did have 372 homes that were impacted by an inundation of some sort, not all over floor flooding, but across their land. We stood up really well. There were 120 businesses impacted, and I think over the whole period there were 69 road closures, but we managed to get those reopened fairly quickly. There's been not only regular meetings of disaster management, but also one of the Directors General has been chairing Economic Functional Recovery Group flooding impacts meetings. And I think the most important message that we've had out of those meetings over the last few days has been to make sure that the government departments distribute to all local authorities the grant information that's available. There are significant grants being made available for business, and we'd love our businesses to access those grants. So that information is about to be distributed by the government. Moving on, we had Councillor Vorster chair an online meeting of the Junior Council where the new Junior Mayor was endorsed. So that was attended by the Mayor, Councillor Vorster, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Hamill, Tozer, Belden, Lumsden, McDonald, Owen-Jones and myself. It showed That's all right. Thanks, Councillor Young. Sorry, Councillor Pauline Young as well. We didn't see your face on the screen, unfortunately. Yeah, so it did show how adept the junior council has become on Zoom meetings because there were a lot of students involved and it all went very smoothly. So I'd like to send our congratulations to the Junior Mayor, Samuel Brown, from the Queensland Academy's Health Sciences campus. I think Councillor Patterson was very proud of that appointment. He will be the 30th Junior Mayor of the city because 2022 marks the 30th anniversary of the program. So congratulations to other Junior Council executive members as well. The Mayor and I attended a luncheon to celebrate the 2021 Women in Business Award winners. And it was an interesting day where we got to hear from all of those award winners about their activities and their plans moving forward to benefit the city. Then on Thursday, the 3rd of March, Councillor Patterson, the Mayor and myself attended the concrete pour at our new disaster management unit, which is really exciting. We've had a great contribution from the state. I think you'll all recall supporting this project before we got any state funding, but through the Mayor's advocacy, we've been able to attract $9.8 million in state funding towards building for us a state-of-the-art facility that will serve us well in the event of a Category 4 or 5 cyclone, which I understand from my meetings at DMU that we are overdue for, and let's hope it holds off and we don't see one anytime soon. But this facility should be finished within 12 months, and the Mayor has put the pressure on to make an effort to have it delivered by Christmas. On Tuesday, the 8th of March, was International Women's Day, and I attended a breakfast with Councillor Pauline Young and Councillor Gail O'Neill at the Island, where there were guest speakers including Courtney Hancock, Trish O'Callaghan, and the winner of last year's Women in Business Awards, Felicity Cohen. It was a great morning. Karen Phillips was in fine form, and the room was absolutely packed with Gold Coast business women, and there just seems to be more and more successful women every year, and makes us really proud to be part of this city. The CEO and the Mayor's Chief of Staff and I visited Melbourne between Wednesday and Friday. We jammed a lot into those few days. We got up early and went for a walk, and as you can see, visited Shane Warne's memorial. And it was interesting to see not only flowers, but cans of Vic Bitter and baked beans and the odd packet of cigarettes strewn around the memorial, and a number of people there photographing. And so we paid our respects to Shane Warne. We met with the Gurner Group, who are just about to construct a $1.75 billion project, La Pelago Resort at Budds Beach. That will be a 4-tower complex with incredible offerings, including retail and hospitality. There was also a meeting with the Hotter Chair, Kate Brennan, and many of us over the last few weeks have been involved in Zoom meetings with Kate, but it was good to see Kate face to face and have a briefing on the Hotter board moving forward. I didn't attend a meeting that was conducted by the CEO and the Mayor's Chief of Staff at one of Australia's biggest video games venue, and I'm sure that you'll all be aware of the keen interest in developing on this precinct something of that nature. And Mr. CEO, I don't know if you'd like to add anything about that briefing since I wasn't there.
Only to say that it was very interesting. It was actually Australia's largest esports venue, and some say, oh, got to stand. Thanks. Some say the largest in the world. I think the owner said that, Madam Acting Mayor. But it was absolutely worthwhile and an interesting example of a facility that could be built here on the coast.
Thank you. And then we had the pleasure of going to a new Melbourne tourism attraction called Yarra Botanica. And it's a structure that I understand has taken about 4 years to get approved through their council. But a double-storey bar, if you like, right on the Yarra River that offers only Victorian produce and only Victorian wines. It was very well attended, and the reason we were there was because there has been a suggestion that it might be a concept that could be developed by the people who have developed this right here on the Gold Coast. So another interesting and new attraction that may come to our city. We were quite clearly we would do Queensland produce. Okay. We then went and had a look at the festival space at Hanging Rock, which, as you can see, is a paddock. But it has been a parcel of land acquired by the local council right next door to the Hanging Rock land, and the rock, I understand, provides a backdrop to the infrastructure that's brought in for concerts that hold about 5,000 people. So we had a very thorough overview of what's necessary in bringing in a crowd of that size and the infrastructure necessary to put on a concert. And I guess that, along with our inspections of a couple of sculpture parks, was all about our forward planning for the Green Heart. So 2 of the sculpture parks we looked at, one was a 16-hectare nature park. They were quite different. So the one that you're looking at there is the nature park, and it's very rustic but has some incredible sculptures. I think Victoria is really lucky in that it has incredible benefactors, and a lot of these sculptures are donations from art enthusiasts in Victoria, and it's something we aspire to here on the Gold Coast, that perhaps we can one day look to benefactors to assist us in the delivery of arts in this city. The Point Leo Winery sculpture is quite different and very manicured, and it sits on 33 hectares of land with walkways all around it, overviewing the peninsula. Just magnificent, and really provided a vision that we could hope to see established as part of our Green Heart development. And then we came home, and on Saturday morning I welcomed Major General Jake Elwood to the city. Major General Elwood has just been announced as the State Recovery Coordinator, and he visited a number of community hubs across the city. I think mainly went to Palm Beach and met with community. Our Director Alison Ewens escorted him from the DMU, where Luke Connery gave a very thorough overview of all of our activities, and I think even though we're building a new centre, he was highly impressed with what we have at our current DMU and how well it had been staffed and our latest troubles managed by the centre. So that's that, and with that I move that the Acting Mayor's report be welcomed and noted. And seconded Councillor Owen Jones. All in favour? Thank you. Now I've lost my agenda. Okay, we have no clarifications, no business arising from the minutes, and no presentations. Any forward conflict of interest declarations, Councillor? No? Oh, you have a forward one, Councillor Young, or just for a committee? Oh, thank you.
Mayor. Before I begin on that, I'd just like to recognise the incredible effort and activation within the community in response to the floods recently. We've seen unprecedented activation, I think, from community members who've just got off their backsides and encouraged other people to help and provide support, and I've been very, very impressed by that, and I think we all have been. If I could draw your attention to the matter at hand, though, it's I received an email through the Division 5 mailbox from a council officer, the Bushfire Management Planner, in which he says, "Dear Councillor Young, the Natural Areas Management Unit is currently considering options for the 2023 Hazard Reduction Burn Program. A particular parkland, which is adjacent to your property, is being assessed, and representatives from NAMU would like to have the opportunity to meet with you on site to discuss the proposed burn plan. Would you mind letting us know if and when you may be available to meet with us for this discussion?" So my property is not within my division, I'm in Division 2, and so I thought I'd best write to the City Solicitor, who's provided advice, and hence this declaration that there's a possible conflict of interest in that the Council's Bushfire Management Plan has written to me in my capacity as a private landholder in regards to the desire to discuss with me a proposed hazard reduction burn to be undertaken by his team in the 2023 hazard reduction burn season on council land that is adjacent to my property. The City Solicitor's advice is to, given that I have previously declared a conflict in that I'm chairman of the Guanabara Rural Fire Brigade, and she thinks it's best for me to make a declaration. So there's the information. I'm happy to respond to any questions, of course. I'm seeking to be able to meet with that officer or those officers and discuss this just like an ordinary resident. Of course, I bring to it another perspective, being an informed member of the Guanabara Fire Brigade, but my belief is that I can bear the public's interest to prevail over my own personal interest. Thanks, Acting Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Does Councillor Vorster, do you have a question?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just through you to Councillor Young. I'm just interested in how it came to be that you were contacted at your divisional email address rather than by letterbox drop by city officers in your inbox. Can you shed any light on that?
I'm quite happy for you to see this email.
Yeah.
So the email was sent from the Bushfire Management Plan in Parks and Rec Services to the Division 5 mailbox, and it's addressed Dear Councillor Young. So I presume rather than him sending me a letter to my private postal address, he's thought that that's a most expedient thing, and I can understand that, but you're welcome to see this.
No, so,
That's fine, Councillor.
yeah, so Madam Chair, I'm actually perfectly comfortable with Councillor Young participating completely in the process, just as a matter of, I think, protocol moving forward. I think city officers need to make every attempt to contact us in our private capacities when there are issues affecting our property. I think for me, and Councillor Young's done absolutely the correct thing here. The complication arises when there's an issue concerning our private property and we receive an email saying, Dear Councillor. So if, through you, Madam Acting Mayor, to the CEO, if that can be cleaned up, I think we'd all benefit from it, but I'm happy to move a procedural motion supporting Councillor Young's participation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did the City Solicitor prepare some words for this?
Oh,
Sorry.
for what? That he may participate.
Through you, Acting Mayor, I haven't prepared the words, but I understand Councillor Tozer has some words ready.
Ah, there you go.
The solicitor provided a folder, I think maybe for all of us, and she referred me to it last week very kindly, and I've remembered to bring it today. So the words
Mine's,
I think
mine's
might be right
bigger.
here.
Well, Madam,
Mine's bigger than yours.
Oh, your folder is much bigger than mine, and I'm not interested in a contest of magnitude with you, Councillor Gates. So it's about size.
Yeah, well, perhaps Councillor Tozer might like to move it and you might like to second it.
I'm very happy seeing as he's obviously had an earlier discussion on the matter.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Tozer.
Madam Acting Mayor, I would move that Councillor Peter Young should participate in the meeting despite the conflict of interest because any benefit that Councillor Young may receive is no greater than the benefit that the broader local community would receive.
Thank you.
That's one of many.
Thanks, Councillor Tozer, and that's seconded by Councillor Vorster.
Sorry, Madam Chair, is it right to say no greater than the broader local community or more than a substantial number of people in the local government area? Just if we're using your words. Madam Chair, through you to the City Solicitor.
I'm comfortable with either set of words.
Perfect. Tozer and Vorster.
Now behave yourselves. We're not going to have you misbehave today under my watch, okay? Councillor Owen-Jones.
Thank you. Just to let Councillor Peter Young know that if he needs to reach out to the Division 2 office, we're happy to assist in anything in that regard.
Thank you very much. I'll now take the vote and Mr McCabe will call the division. Thank you. Those in favour?
Councillor Gates, Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Barr-Lumsden, Councillor Tozer, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Vorster, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor McDonald and Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. Yeah. Could we note that Councillor Young did not vote, please? Okay, now we're going to move on to reception and consideration of committee reports, and we're going to behave, Councillor Vorster.
We are. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the special budget meeting held on the 23rd of February. Were there any corrections, councillors? Moved to receive the report, Councillor Owen-Jones, seconded Councillor Peter Young. All in favour? That is carried. Lifestyle and community.
Sorry, Madam Chair, so we've resolved to receive it. Do we now need to accept the...
Oh, I have to adopt it,
Yeah.
sorry. Moved Councillor Vorster,
Yep.
seconded Councillor Tozer. All in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Mayor. Madam Acting Mayor, I'd like to move that the minutes of the Lifestyle and Community Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 1st of March 2022, covered by recommendations 1 through 8, be received. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baildon Lumsden, all in favour? That is carried. Councillor Vorster.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. If we could move 6.4 separately, I've received some advice from city officers that we need to tidy up some words to make sure that they can act on the committee's wishes.
Okay, we'll go to 6.4.
I understand our Minute Secretary might have a copy of those words.
Okay, back to you, Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Mayor. I'm happy to move the following changed committee recommendation, and if I have a seconder, very happy to say one.
Councillor Hamill.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Mayor. Plainly, we live in uncertain times, and I think now more than ever in the lead up to Anzac Day, we take every opportunity to honour those who have secured the freedoms that we now enjoy today. One of the most touching ways of doing that every day is to lift the names from streets right across the Gold Coast and give people pause when they enter their streets to acknowledge the sacrifice of the service person or a family who have made a sacrifice for our nation by seeing the ADF logo or a poppy affixed to their street sign blade. Madam Acting Mayor, there was a lot of work put into this by city officers, particularly by the heritage team who made a significant contribution to teasing out all of the history that they could. What we did at committee though, Madam Acting Mayor, was to expand the scope of eligible streets to make sure that the greatest number of families could be acknowledged from right across the Gold Coast. And I understand that there has been some very positive early conversations with the ADF already, and hopefully in the lead up to Anzac Day, we will all, in every community across the Gold Coast, have an opportunity to draw attention to that sacrifice, which is now more important than ever. Thank you.
Thank you. I know, Councillor Caldwell, that you were vitally interested in this program. You might like to add a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Acting Mayor, and thank you also to Councillor Vorster for his particular interest in this matter, because I know he's worked very hard in the background to get the best possible outcome. Across our whole city, we have a lot more heritage than what we might think at first glance, and I think the initial effort by council officers was very much driven towards a specific recognition where a individual name was reflected in a street sign. As Councillor Vorster has said, we've now broadened that to give a greater sweep to recognise family names, many of whom we as councillors will be familiar with, that should be recognised because part of their family story is the sacrifice that one or more of their family members made in serving our nation. So I think this is a great program, and I very much look forward to having it rolled out in a meaningful way prior to Anzac Day.
Thanks, Councillor Caldwell. Any other speakers before I go to Councillor Vorster to close?
Madam Chair, lest we forget.
Thank you. I'll take the vote. All in favour? That is carried. Any other items, councillors? Councillor Owen-Jones. We'll go to 7.1. Sure. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Vorster.
Thank you. It's just in regards to the relocation of the Oxenford Men's Shed, which has been an ongoing project for, I think, probably the last 5 or 6 years. There's been a lot of moving parts. The report at this present point in time is confidential, but hopefully after today's meeting, it'll be substantively made non-confidential, in particular in regards to the elements that directly impact the Oxenford Men's Shed themselves. We have, through a couple of years budget process, allocated almost $800,000 to the project, but the recommendation today notes the significant shortfall in regards to the proposal and the need to regroup and look to see whether or not there are any other alternatives. So I didn't want it to go through today, Madam Acting Mayor, without saying anything, but we will continue to work trying to resolve the issue at that particular venue.
Thanks, Councillor Owen-Jones. Any other speakers? Did you wish to close?
No.
Okay, I'll take the vote. All in favour? That is carried. Anything else, councillors? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Mayor. I move that the remaining recommendations of the Lifestyle and Community Committee be adopted. Thank you.
Seconded, Councillor Belden Lumsden. All in favour? Carried.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Director. Okay. Councillor Pauline Young. We'll move on to Transport and Infrastructure Committee.
Thank you. Madam Acting Mayor, I move that the report of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 1st of March 2022, covered by recommendations 1 to 6, be received.
Seconder, Councillor Tozer. All in favour? Thank you. Any items, councillors? Councillor Vorster. Hello, Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on 6.3, I just want to speak very briefly just to, I suppose, support some of the very good work by city officers that brought us to that point.
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Mayor. Madam Acting Mayor, I'm sure we would all agree in this room that easing congestion on our roads is perhaps the #1 priority of all Gold Coasters. It's the work that Gold Coasters want to see if we are to see our population continue to grow. At committee, unfortunately, we had an item that suggested we were considering our transport strategy, when in actual fact we weren't considering the strategy itself, but merely a discussion document to stoke a conversation in the community. And boy, did we have a conversation at committee, and boy, has the community been having a conversation ever since. The impression I was left with is that city officers clearly understood that traffic congestion and easing it by taking a very multimodal approach was an utmost priority for us as a committee, and I'm sure as a council, and we support further investment in the space. What we don't want to do is to get the conversation wrong, because when the conversation's wrong, you quickly erode the confidence of the community, and then you quickly erode the political will to get on with the job of building better roads and maybe bridges, but we'll see that. I just wanted to, through you, Madam Acting Chair, to thank the city officers who do such a remarkable job every day squeezing out efficiency in our road network. And the discussion that we had at committee was in no way a reflection on that job, but rather our role as community representatives to craft the message in a way that will be receptive to the community and stoke the right productive sort of conversation. So I just wanted to put that on the public record because we all support the work of that team. The Gold Coast wants to see that team succeed. We just want to make sure that the priorities are right. And hopefully we've discharged that obligation by endorsing the committee recommendation today, which is to take a bit more time to nail it.
Thank you. I didn't get a seconder, but Councillor Pauline Young will second that. Are there any speakers against or any other speakers in favour? If not, we'll take the vote. All in favour? That is carried. Thank you, Councillor Vorster. Any other items, councillors? Back to you, Councillor Young.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I move that the remaining recommendations of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee be adopted.
Seconder, Councillor Glenn Tozer. Thank you. All in favour? That is carried. Thanks. Thanks, Acting Director.
Yeah, I did. And what they did in the meeting was... Yeah. And you speak so well.
No, I do.
No, it's good. But it's important.
Well, it's the professional reputation of our city officers.
Yeah. And they do incredible
Okay, councillors, we'll move on to Planning and Environment Committee, and I'll go to Councillor Caldwell.
discussion yesterday.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. I move that the report of the Planning and Environment Committee meeting held on the Thursday, the 3rd of March 2022, covered by recommendations 1 to 11, be received.
Seconder, Councillor Owen-Jones. All in favour? That is carried. Any items, Councillor? Councillor Darren Taylor.
Thank you. 6.1, thank you.
Thank you. Why didn't you send me? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I wasn't, unfortunately, wasn't available at the committee meeting. I was away, but this particular development is a residential property that has been seeking uplift and the ability to exceed or be built outside or inside the setbacks of the waterfront property. And I have some real concerns in relation to the actual proposal, in relation to the height that's been exceeded, but also in relation to the setbacks from the waterfront in conjunction with the height also.
So did you have any questions?
Yep. In your report, it does mention that in character, there's properties in that particular area that exceed the 9 metres. From that particular report, how many of those properties that exceed the 9 metre also actually go into the 8.1 metres of the setback to the waterfront?
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, can I just ask Lara to answer that question?
Sure. Lara, please stand.
Thank you. Through you, Mrs. Mayor, on page 128 of the planning report that was presented at the Planning Committee, it does show a diagram with the properties that have structures exceeding into that 8.1 metres. We haven't identified specific properties with the partial third stories that do exceed into that waterway setback area.
Okay, thank you. So I'm really trying to understand in relation to protecting amenities in the particular area. So we understand there's a performance outcome and we're looking at other properties in the particular area that meets the character of the area. My concern is we may be having some properties. One of the other questions I've got is what percentage of the properties in the particular area actually are greater than the 9 metres as a percentage? So I know there's listed a amount of 9, but how many out of how many dwellings in that particular area as a percentage is greater than the 9 metres, and what point do we determine it to be a character of the particular area?
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, Councillor Taylor, on page 1112, there is a diagram there that does include certain properties with partial third stories. So I wouldn't be probably able to work out a percentage off the top of my head, but you can see those that are included there with the comments.
Councillor Vorster.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. Through you to city officers, perhaps to the director, but whomever. What was the original proposed height for this development as submitted by the applicant?
Through the Mayor, the original height of the dwelling house was 11.5 metres.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. So through you again to city officers, would it be fair to say that the original height would have been out of character of the area? Thank you.
Through the Acting Mayor, the reason that we have imposed the reduced height for the overall building height of the dwelling is for it to be more in character with the dwellings in the area, which have a consistent, I guess, an average building height of around 10.5 metres.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. And could we just briefly understand how it came to be that this development now has proposed conditions of approval with a much lower height?
Through the Acting Mayor, so as part of our character analysis when we were assessing the development, I guess the Planning Act for an impact accessible application allows us to consider relevant matters, character and amenity being one of those. So in terms of being consistent with the character in the surrounding area and bringing it more in line with the dwelling heights in that area, it was recommended that a reduced building height be recommended.
So, Madam Chair, if I could just then clarify, after all those questions, City officers formed the view then that the original application proposed a built form that was not sympathetic to the local character and therefore could potentially not be supported through the development assessment process, and that City officers made the decision to recommend a much lower height, which brought it within the threshold of the acceptable characteristics of the area, right, which meant that it could be supported subject to other conditions. Is that right?
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, Councillor Vorster, that's correct.
Right, so, Madam Chair, through you to Councillor Taylor, I think the range of the 11 point something to the 10.6 is probably the height which is unsympathetic to the local character, and 10.6 is the range when it then becomes sympathetic. Thank you.
I'll go back to Councillor Taylor and then to Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, and through the chair, and thank you. I do appreciate and thank the officers for considering that part of the changes originally proposed. My concern still relates to the third story that exceeds it, but is also inside the setbacks of the 9 metres of or 8.1 metres of the waterfront. So we may be accepting a improved or reduction of height for the particular development. The concern and the concern I have with the particular proposal at this current stage is that also the partial third story does also go inside the 8.1 setback of the actual property, where as a partial it does have the opportunity to be moved back inside that particular that setback. So if I can, I would like to yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. Perhaps just in wrapping up what Councillor Taylor's, I think, trying to achieve, I've got a form of words here that could address some of that upper floor pressure that I think is the real pain point on this application. So if you're happy to take a motion,
I'm happy to take a motion from Councillor Caldwell.
So if we can, sorry, just follow along over there at the minutes desk. If you could just put a full stop after 2.7 metres and then delete the rest of that there, and then we'll insert a number two, a new Roman 2, which says that ensure all elements of the partial third story exactly as per the screen. So all elements of the partial third story are located a minimum of 8.1 metres from the rear property boundary and to maintain the setbacks to the front and side property boundaries. And if I have a seconder, I'll in due course speak to that.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Taylor, thank you.
As in we don't want them to push out sideways. So. Thanks, Acting Mayor. This, as is often the case, it's the smaller developments that cause the most interest. And there's certainly been a lot of interest from the Isle of Capri residents in relation to this particular house, probably because it's bubbled up in an impact assessable application process rather than being a certification by a private certifier, for example. And so we've had a very good opportunity to look at this application closely, which is the whole intent of a impact assessable application. The officers at the outset had identified that the original height proposed was in excess of 11 metres and that was probably going to be too high to be in line with the reasonable expectations of the character of that particular neighbourhood. We have seen in this street and in the nearby streets a number of houses that are of 3 stories. So it's not fair to go as far as saying that 3 stories should be ruled out, but certainly the expectation is clearly that the 3rd story needs to be sympathetic to the neighbourhood. And so the changes that were suggested by the council officers were essentially to bring down the floor to ceiling heights to 2.7 metres to reduce the overall building bulk. And Councillor Taylor, in his discussions with me outside this meeting and then in the meeting today, has clearly indicated that there is a community expectation around a clearly defined setback to the waterfront. Now, in reality, this is a flood measure rather than an aesthetic measure. But clearly the community have got an expectation that that's where we should be trying to aim for. And in circumstances where it can be delivered, it probably should be. So the proposed Roman 2 here pushes the third storey back to not less than the 8.1 metres from the waterfront. And I should say that I was quite comforted that the streetscape of this particular building, where the third storey is set back some 13 metres from the road frontage, will predominantly present as a two-storey house, which will fit in quite nicely in the area. So I thank Councillor Taylor for his work on this matter. I know he's been balancing the expectations of the broader community as well as the private property owners' rights in relation to this site. And I think if we can support this particular outcome today, we've reached a very good and reasonable outcome.
Thanks, Councillor Caldwell. Are there any speakers against? Question, Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. I'm sorry I didn't attend I wasn't able to attend the planning meeting, but I just had a question about the objections. I'm assuming the objections came in as part of the original application. So I'm experiencing myself when a application is changed and the changes are made through information requests, sometimes that information doesn't get out to the general public. So I'm just wondering if the officers can tell me.
Well, I can respond to that. The residents nearby are very well aware of the reduction, and still have an issue with this particular development. I will take the opportunity to speak against it myself since I'm at the microphone. I do appreciate what Councillor Caldwell has moved this morning, but I guess my concern with this one is that because it was triggered to impact, it's come to our attention that there have been a number of previous relaxations provided that perhaps don't meet the intent of our strategic framework for a suburban neighbourhood of low intensity. And I think for me, a 20 centimetre setback to another property boundary is simply not enough. And I understand that setback relaxations have been provided to the properties either side. I think that in those circumstances, from my own personal view, that should have an effect on what gets developed next. And I don't think that because that precedent exists either side, we should automatically say, well, they could have it too. I think it does impact on the area, and because it was triggered to impact, we should be considering the strategic framework. And the strategic framework clearly says that suburban neighbourhoods are places for low intensity, low rise, predominantly detached housing that retains and enhances local character and amenity, maintaining existing scale, building height, despite its proximity to transport or other services, and that they are less clustered and characterised by a feeling of openness, with buildings positioned in a generous landscape setting. And that is not what we are achieving in this particular instance. So I respect that there have been height reductions and a further reduction proposed by the Chair of Planning today. I will just be recording my vote in the negative. Are there any other speakers for? No? Would you like to close debate, Councillor Caldwell? Okay, I'll take the vote. All in favour?
Councillor Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Van Lumsden, Councillor Tozer, Councillor Vorster, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor O'Neill.
And against?
Councillor Gates, Councillor Hamill, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Taylor, Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, that is carried. Are there any other items, councillors? Councillor Tozer.
Thank you. I wasn't able to attend the planning committee, but I had a question about item 6.4, which was a start item.
Okay, we'll go to 6.4.
My question, Madam Acting Mayor, relates to page 464, and it's a table. It's noted confidential, but I don't think it is confidential. It's not on grey paper. So before I ask the question, can I just clarify whether it's confidential or not?
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, Councillor Tozer, there is only one item on this agenda that's confidential. We're aware that with the new Info Council, if there's one item that's confidential, that's why confidential is at the top, but you still have your grey papers for that item. So this one is not.
Yeah, great, excellent. So my question actually relates to the table on page 464 addresses a number of assessed roads where wildlife might move across a road, and there's a number of different. The columns effectively identify a different type of mitigating measure that might assist wildlife to get from one side of the road to the other. Perhaps chickens, Madam Acting Mayor, perhaps other animals like koalas. But on the list, there's a number of roads in Division 9, and I wondered whether it was discussed at the meeting whether divisionally the trial could be augmented by delivering one of those options as opposed to the whole program. So that's my question. Can a divisional councillor deliver one of those columns? And the one I'm specifically looking at is perhaps Bonogan Road. There is one item that is costed, which is a koala ladder. We have 18 strikes that are identified in the report, and I thought maybe that would be something that I could do from a divisional level.
Director.
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, Councillor Tozer. Recommendation 2 does talk about us doing that next feasibility investigation. So what I'd probably suggest, if you're comfortable, is we can build that in. We're happy to come around to all councillors and see if there's particular ones that you would want. Alternatively, it's if you wanted to do a separate resolution, we could do a trial just for that. But I think with this particular project, it would be better to keep it all together.
So, Madam Acting Mayor, my issue isn't. I think the trial and the resolution makes sense to me, so I don't want to change that. I think what I do want to do is that the unique variables of Napa Road are entirely different to the variables on Bonogan Road. I think what I'm trying to work out is whether there's anything stopping me from allocating local area works for just that item.
The Director says nothing stopping you.
Okay. So, on notice then, can I get one of your officers to contact my office, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Tozer. I'll go to Councillor Young.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. It's the same item. I was pretty much the one that instigated our direction in pursuing this report, and I'm pleased with the findings. If it were up to me, I'd just say let's move the $14 million and get all that treatment done this year, because I think it's
not
vital.
Up to you.
Yeah, exactly. But I'll draw your attention, if I can, to the committee the recommendation from the officers and committee on page 462 of the agenda. And number 1 says that Council endorsed the findings of the Wildlife Vehicle Collision Mitigation Program report as a decision assistance tool for city officers to deliver improved fauna-safe roads. And I would just want to articulate a concern about that, because I read that as being, this is a tool that can help us work with council officers when we identify problems and say, let's get some treatment here. There's a whole range of different treatments identified that are suitable for different outcomes and circumstances. And I note with concern an item on the transport and infrastructure agenda for next week, which addresses a petition from the community of an area of Highland Park where they've witnessed multiple vehicle strikes on macropods, and they've petitioned council to improve or provide some kind of wildlife crossing. Officers have said, no, you can't have anything. And the reason is because it's not in this report. It's not identified as one of the key roads. And I find that a real negative interpretation of what our objective here is, which is, I think, to enable us to provide better facilitation of the movement, safe movement of wildlife, whether that be deer or koalas or anything else in between, and not for officers to rely upon this report as a means to reject those kind of proposals to improve the safety of wildlife. So I'm just drawing that to your attention now. Pardon me.
Okay.
And when the matter comes before T&I, which I haven't been consulted about, by the way, even though I'm the divisional councillor, I will be having that same complaint and hopefully achieve a better outcome than what's recommended.
Are you comfortable with leaving it till then for us to act on in response to the petition when it's at committee next week?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
In the meantime, we don't have a motion
No.
here, so we'll just leave that to go with the rest if you don't mind.
Do I have a mover? Councillor Tozer, seconded Councillor Vorster. Are there any other questions about that one, councillors? If not, I'll take the vote. All in favour? That is carried. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's item 6.2.
Yep.
The resolution. Madam Chair, I'd like to move for a refusal for this particular development. And if I could have the resolution up on the screen, please.
No. Okay. Okay. I'll let you speak about on what basis, Councillor McDonald, before I seek a seconder.
Okay. The resolution's up on the screen. Have you got the resolution there? That's the resolution I'm putting forward. The council refuses the development permit for a material change of use impact assessment for 43.5 metre building height, proposed a 50% uplift above the code assessable building height of 29 metres at 949 to 953 Gold Coast Highway, Palm Beach. The proposed scale and intensity of the tower dominates the skyline and does not achieve the desired slender bulk, form or amenity outcome. The proposal does not reinforce the local identity or sense of place, resulting in a non-compliance with strategic outcome 3.3.1 in brackets 3. Strategic outcome 3.3.1 in brackets 5. Specific outcome 3.3.2.1 in brackets 9.
Yeah.
Specific outcome 3.3.2.1 in brackets 11. And specific outcome 3.7.2.1 in brackets 3 of the strategic framework. The cumulative impacts of the tower, which are a direct result of the high side cover and high density, will result in an undesirable development pattern and poor amenity outcome, presenting a non-compliance with overall outcome 6.2.2.2 in brackets B in brackets V of the medium density residential zone. The development is contrary to the reasonable expectations of the community, having regard to the significant number of objections lodged in relation to the proposal, 26 properly made and 9 not properly made.
Okay. Councillors, if you've had that time to absorb that, do I have a seconder? Councillor Young. Okay. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Throughout the report, the reference is made on a number of occasions the height of the Royal Palm of 75.5, 26 stories, and Princess Palm, 48.61, 18 stories. Pages 169, 174, 178.
Sorry, Councillor McDonald. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, excuse me. I think I may have a conflict of interest here. I've just noticed that there, somebody I know is one of the owners of the development.
Would you like to make a declaration?
Yes, she's a personal friend, but not a close personal friend. But we have gone out to lunch and out to dinner with groups of associated friends. So. And
did you want to seek advice from the city solicitor?
I actually would like to leave the room because I just don't want to be. As I said, we've been out to lunch, we've been out to dinner. I think it's best if I leave the room. I don't want to take part in this decision. Thanks. Yep. Yeah. Yes. Robin James. It looks like it. She doesn't live. I don't know. Sorry, I missed this. Yeah.
Is this the Nexus one?
I actually said she's a personal friend, but not a close personal friend. Yeah, that's... Yes. I'd say it's one of the neighbouring, well, lot 3.
So funny.
Should I name the lot? She's named as one of the owners in lot 3. Yeah, and I'll be leaving the room. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry. But anyway, thanks, Councillor O'Neill. Okay, I'll go back to you, Councillor McDonald. Sorry about that.
Madam Chair, to be approved at 43.5 metres, this development has to meet all of the 9 strategic outcomes at 3.3.2.1 in brackets 9 in the strategic intent of the city plan to achieve the 50% height uplift. This may occur in limited circumstances. Keeping in mind that when the Royal Palms and Princess Palms were built, the planning approval was not required. I've taken some of this wording out. There was an appeal in 2010 in relation to the property next door. There was then no height restriction at preference expressed by the planning scheme. Since then, a 7-storey height restriction or a trigger has been the feature of all 3 planning schemes adopted in 1982, 1994 and 2003. Under these schemes, no further buildings of that nature at this end of Palm Beach have been approved. Heights, council changed building heights from stories to metres back in, I think it was 2017, is that correct? Could I ask the Director? When were the building heights changed from stories?
Oh, from stories, 2016.
Yes, through you, Madam Acting Mayor, Councillor McDonald would have been with the city plan in 2016.
16.
Yeah.
16? Yes, 16.
Okay, so because Palm Beach was a 7-storey height limit, so it was changed to metres in 2016 to 29 metres. The report states that the development does not solely rely on the existence of the Royal and Princess Palms and mentioned 12 other developments. Note that these developments have been approved in recent years, 2017, 18, 19, 20 and 21. This has come into existence since the height in stories was changed to height in metres. Previously, 7-storey buildings ranged in metres from 21.7 metres to 25.5 metres, with beautiful gardens and smaller site cover. Since the introduction of the height in metres, we've seen larger footprint, coverage and little landscaping. A backward step, higher buildings, larger footprint and little landscaping. The site cover at ground for this particular development is 62.2%, with a podium site cover of 79%. Density under the town plan is 1 bed per 33 square metres. In this particular application, it's 1 bed per 15 square metres. In the court papers of 2009, 2010, the features clash with rather than complement the character. A third building of a similar height to the smaller of the two would be no less discordant. Building heights on the overlay have not significantly changed since that refusal, so comments regarding height as a detriment of character remain relevant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a speaker against? Councillor Caldwell.
I've listened carefully to what Councillor McDonald said, so I don't do this lightly, but I will foreshadow the committee recommendation for approval, and in the event that this motion's unsuccessful, we'll deal with that.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Well, perhaps I should just speak against this, and I don't do it easily or lightly because I know that Councillor McDonald is particularly passionate about ensuring that the quality of life in Palm Beach is maintained into the future. Regrettably, I know that there is still a lot of baggage from the WBQH ABCDEFGHI case from 2010, but it's not a relevant decision for us to be considering in this matter today. What we need to consider in this matter today is the current city plan and the way that that is implemented. And whilst I appreciate that there is some community angst around what is perceived to be a relaxation above the map type when an applicant goes to an impact assessment, in actual fact what we are trying to achieve is an absolute handbrake to make sure that people know exactly what the absolute height will be in these locations, and that if it goes above the mapped height and goes towards that 50%, that the public will be consulted by way of an impact accessible application. The officers have done a very detailed body of work on this particular assessment, and it should be contrasted to many of the other very poor design outcomes that we see thrown around from time to time that we quite properly kick to the curb. But this is not one of them. And Madam Acting Mayor, the difficulty we face is that as a city, there is going to become even more housing pressure, and for us to start chopping off units or size in this particular development, which is well located and well serviced, immediately adjacent to public amenities, with great transport either through the bus network as it is now or the light rail into the future, we actually need to be delivering housing product in these well-serviced locations to ensure that future generation of Gold Coasters can actually live the genuine Gold Coast lifestyle in suburbs like Palm Beach, or quite frankly, everyone will get priced out of the marketplace. So we have to have an eye on whether or not this application ticks the planning boxes, which it does, and keep in the back of our minds that we actually need to be providing housing stock and housing choice to the people who want to live in our city. Those not just being interstate and overseas people whom we welcome to our city, but indeed our children and our children's children who will need more housing or they will not be able to stay here. So this type of application meets the planning scheme requirements, and it meets many of our aspirations for what we want to see in our city.
Thank you, Councillor Caldwell. Councillor Tozer, a question?
My question is actually about the 50% uplifting, and again, we've had this conversation a lot. My understanding is that the council appears to be moving in a direction where that 50% uplift mechanism is coming to an end in the future season. Could you give some clarity to me about when that is likely to occur?
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, Councillor Tozer. So the 50% uplift has been removed in Amendment 2 and 3 for the targeted growth areas. What we're doing with future amendments, so as we're going through the light rail areas that will come to committee next week, that will end up phasing out as we go through there. So it's not in Amendment 2 and 3, it doesn't remove it for the whole city, it's just the targeted growth areas at this stage.
Can I follow up that question with, is the application here in one of those targeted growth areas?
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, Councillor Tozer, no, that's Bigger Waters, Labrador and Southport West.
Yep, thank you. So, final question about this 50% uplift mechanism. It occurs to me that were this applicant to be refused by council under the current planning scheme, which we are going through the process of changing, it'd be difficult to leverage that future decision of council to remove the 50% uplift to defend a refusal. Is that a fair
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, Councillor Tozer. So at the moment and I think we've spoken about it quite a lot, we're not taking into account the future amendments in assessment. We will have a report come through committee in the next few months which will address that, and also how we will be addressing superseded planning scheme applications when that happens.
Yep.
But at the moment it is assessment on the current city plan, which is what the assessment has been done on.
Yeah, so my final question through you, Madam Acting Mayor, is that in the future, were an applicant to lodge a hypothetical application just like this one, and amendments, the amendments that are currently being considered, or I believe soon to be considered by the state government, at what time in the future, speculative perhaps, would an application like this be able to be refused or not eligible for that 50% uplift? When is that likely to occur?
So through you, Madam Acting Mayor, if this particular application was in the targeted growth areas where the 50% uplift was being reduced for those, it would be at a point where we're confident that the state government is moving towards an approval. So we haven't made that decision yet. There's certainly, Cherie could comment on this a lot more than me in terms of case law on the old Cody principle, which is still used. But at the moment we've been very clear, and I think Council's been very clear to our department, that we are using the current city plan.
Yeah, and I think I'm not trying to ask a legal question. I'm trying to get a picture in my head for my community who are interested in high rises on the coastline, even though most of the community I represent are in the west. We appear to be signalling to the community that 50% uplift is coming to an end, but that perspective clearly isn't in place right now. So you said the targeted growth areas are gone. This is not a targeted growth area. Is it 4 years away? Is it 5 years away? Assuming the council continues to move in this direction of removing the 50% uplift, what is a reasonable assumption or reasonable indication we can give to the public about when this 50% uplift element is likely to be no longer applicable?
Madam Mayor, can I just answer to Councillor Tozer? The most critical thing is that where we don't have the 50% uplift as a protection against an unlimited height, effectively through an impact assessment application, we need to have a very contemporary and robust and justifiable position to defend in terms of why a new development should maintain the mapped height. And so the body of work that's been done through Amendments 2 and 3 are effectively, this is our analysis, and that's what we expect to turn up tomorrow. Now, once those amendments age over time, they will come under pressure as having been viewed as not being the contemporary analysis that should be maintained. But I would expect we will get a life for a generation out of those reviews of heights. But we will only remove the 50% essentially where we have a contemporaneous and justifiable body of work to defend the absolute mapped height that is then implemented.
This location, that 50% uplift is actually in the current framework and city plan amendments that are being considered actually not going to be removed.
Correct.
So that will remain. And so the community should expect that applicants lodging applications in this area will still be entitled and eligible to this 50% uplift until council actually resolves to change that, which they have not done thus far.
Correct.
Right. So it appears to me we have a direction for the divisional councillor to change the city plan to accommodate what is, yeah.
I'll go to Councillor Patterson. Thanks, Councillor Tozer.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Through to Councillor Tozer. So the targeted growth areas, and had a lot to do with this, with one being in Southport, is yes, the recommendation, the amendment going to state government means that we don't have 50%, but that's because our officers have gone up every single street and assessed every single street through a process, and in many places increased the height. So in fact, the heights in a lot of those areas, possibly most, will be higher than what the original city plan plus 50% is. It's just we now are saying this is what we expect. So if this assessment is done for this area, like was done for Biggerel Waters or Southport Labrador, it doesn't mean that it drops 50%. it means that there is a walk up every single street, an assessment of what do we want this height to be. Those heights change. They could actually end up being 50% higher, and then we don't need the 50% uplift.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Owen-Jones.
Could I just ask a question in regards to height, through you to the Director? Since 2016, have we approved any height above the 50%?
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, Councillor Owen-Jones, I'm not aware of any, no.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, would you like to close? Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I'd like to just say that the 50% uplift is not a given. It's a pretty strict criteria that has to be met. Now, that criteria has a number of points in 3.3.2.1 that have to be met. If you don't meet one of them, that development cannot be approved. So it's a pretty strict criteria that council has to deal with. It is not a given. Even in the report, it says 50% uplift may occur in limited circumstances. I understood, and I think the council understood, that any 50% uplift, that you have to have an exceptional type of development that meets that 50% uplift. And I don't believe that this development meets that 50% requirement. Presently, the town plan, as it stands now, covers what is required under the South East Queensland Regional Plan. If I'm wrong, please, Director, correct me. But I understand with our density at the present, that's the requirement of the South East Queensland Regional Plan, and it's being met.
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, Councillor McDonald, we're required by the state to include the projections and what some of the work is in the South East Queensland Regional Plan in our city plan, which we do.
Madam Chair, what we're seeing in Palm Beach is 2, 3, 4 times the density of what's under the town plan. I don't think we've seen any developments in recent times that has met the density under the town plan requirement. So, Madam Chair, I would ask that the council support me in the refusal of this development, because what we're seeing now is the heart of Palm Beach is being ripped out. We're losing our soul by some of these high-rise developments that are taking place. They're covering nearly 90% of the block. There's very little landscape. I'm not quite sure how many trees that can be planted on here. I think very few. I know that the officer was scratching around trying to get streetscape, to be added to this area. And, it's what we're seeing, any application that's been coming in for Palm Beach for this 50% uplift, this strict criteria, and council is giving approval to these 50% uplifts. Like I said, we've got a criteria there, and I don't believe that we're meeting that criteria. And I'd ask councillors to support me today in this refusal.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. That closes debate. We'll take the vote on Councillor McDonald's motion. All in favour?
Division.
Division is called.
Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Barr-Lumsden, Councillor Tozer, Councillor Taylor.
Against?
Did you vote against your own refusal? Oh, sorry.
No, it would have been easy
Oh,
with a partial
sorry.
third story.
Yeah. I voted.
Councillor McDonald voted in favour.
Yeah.
Against Councillor Gates, Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Vilster and Councillor Pauline Young.
Okay, the motion is lost. I'll go to Councillor Caldwell for the foreshadowed motion.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. I'll just move the committee recommendation for approval.
Seconded, Councillor Owen-Jones. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Caldwell? Okay, I'll take the vote. All in favour?
Division.
Again? Oh, sorry.
Councillor Gates, Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Barr-Lumsden, Councillor Vorster, Councillor Pauline Young.
Against?
Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Tozer, Councillor Taylor and Councillor McDonald.
Motion carried. Are there any other items, councillors? Councillor Owen Jones.
Just 6.5 briefly, Councillor Gates, which is the request to send the LGIP 2 through to the Minister.
Okay. Go ahead. Oh, thanks, Councillor O'Neill. We'll just wait for Councillor O'Neill to resume her seat. Okay, Councillor Owen Jones.
If I have a second, I'll speak to it just briefly.
Councillor Caldwell.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. This is an important body of work that's been a lot of effort from the city officers, and it's the start of an ongoing process. The city is responsible for 5 infrastructure networks, and there's an enormous body of work that details how we're actually going to plan and fund that. And so that's stormwater, sewer, water supply, local roads and public parks.
Councillors, please listen.
And they're all really important. So I would encourage everybody in the community, when this does go to public advertising, to get involved. I think we all represent communities where we're constantly reminded the need to provide infrastructure and plan for the future, and I constantly have to let residents know that there's actually a body of work where we as the local government do plan for the future, and in fact these are plans out for 2041, and we send it off to the state for their state interest checks, and it's then the responsibility of the state government to hopefully plan for the infrastructure that they're responsible for. So in the coming months we'll all have an opportunity to encourage our residents to get involved in looking to see whether or not we've got it right. And when residents tell us that we're not planning for the future, this is our opportunity to engage with them and try to bring them along for that journey, Madam Acting Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Owen Jones. Do I have any other speakers? If not, we'll take the vote.
Division.
Division? All in favour?
Councillor Gates, Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Bale Lumsden, Councillor Tozer, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Worcester, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor McDonald and Councillor O'Neill.
That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Any other items? Oh, Councillor Worcester.
8.3, if I could. Happy to move that and speak to it briefly. I have a second.
Like to speak to that, Councillor Worcester?
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Mayor.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Tozer, sorry.
So, Madam Acting Mayor, as Councillor Owen Jones quite eloquently put, there are huge pressures on infrastructure that face our city, and we attempt to rise to the occasion. What does not help, though, is when the state government takes a get-out-of-jail-free ticket and passes the infrastructure burden back onto local government. It's been their approach with hospitals, schools, other bits of infrastructure. When those things go up, including social housing, for example, it's the ratepayer that needs to respond financially to dealing with the infrastructure pressures. One of the greatest pressures I think that the Central Gold Coast will have will be the state's proposed Olympic Games village, satellite village at the heart of Robina. And the reason why the impact of that development is going to be so pronounced is that the state government shields developers in that precinct from paying any infrastructure fees altogether. And I have had little comfort from the state government that they intend to paying their way when they intend to progress this athletes village at Robina. Madam Acting Mayor, Robina has a shopping centre that is ultimately owned by the state government through their property development arm, QIC. They have a hospital that is ultimately owned by the state government, a high school ultimately by the state government, an allied health precinct ultimately by the state government, a stadium ultimately by the state government, the train station ultimately by the state government. They induce so much demand on this road network, but their laws mean that developers are not making a contribution beyond the original trunk infrastructure that was put in 35 or 40 years ago. I firmly believe that there is a material risk to the prosperity of the Gold Coast if the state government proceeds with their plans to deliver an athletes' village at Robina without providing an infrastructure dividend to the city. Madam Acting Mayor, just the other day, the Fairfax papers carried the story about how the state and federal governments wanted to deliver a $400 million overpass somewhere in Brisbane. Maybe it was Ipswich, I don't know. They wanted to spend $400 million on a single project tied to the Olympic Games. But where are they around what they will deliver around Robina or anywhere on the Gold Coast, for that matter, as they talk up the Games? I would hate Robina and the Gold Coast to be the dumping ground of the state's accommodation problems in the lead up to the Olympic Games, right? I would hate for them to treat us as the Olympic tip. What I want to see is them pay their way. And I think our work to advocate for a better deal has to begin with a hard, data-driven, evidence-based position. And that's precisely what I would like city officers to go away and do. The effect of this motion, Madam Acting Mayor, is to ask city officers to identify all of the planning risks, the community consultation risks, all of the infrastructure risks, collect all of that information together so that when the Mayor or yourself, hopefully, Madam Acting Mayor, have an opportunity to look these state politicians in the eye and that Olympic Committee in the eye, we can have a very robust moral argument that we deserve our fair share. Supporting this development in Robina is going to come at a cost to the ratepayer. It will come at a cost if the state government does not honour their obligation to give this city a dividend. Hopefully we will have a strong argument and not just conjecture to achieve just that. And I'd beg for my colleagues' support. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Vorster. Could I ask that we see the resolution up on the screen, please? Yeah. You can't find it?
Read it into at least the public record and
Okay,
perhaps it can be
that would be great. Thank you.
referred to the tape. Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor.
Thank you.
Tukafado, here we go. So the motion reads in three parts. Number one, that a report be brought forward outlining the planning, development assessment and infrastructure risks associated with the Satellite Athletes Village proposed by the state government at Robina for the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games. Two, that the report also set out how council, that being us, the community representatives, will be consulted to inform and direct city officers' dealings with their state counterparts. And thirdly, Madam Acting Mayor, that this report be prepared in anticipation of formal representations to the state government to protect ratepayer and community interest. I might just add, the Commonwealth Games came at a cost to the ratepayer, but don't we have great facilities?
We sure do.
We inherited great facilities. There was a dividend. I just don't see the dividend for the Gold Coast with the Olympic Games. And hopefully this is the beginning of a tough conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Vorster. Do I have any other speakers? If not, we'll take the vote. All in favour? That is carried. Councillor Caldwell, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to go to 8.2, so if we could do that next, that'd be great.
8.2. Thank you.
And I'm happy to move the recommendation that was settled on by committee, and if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. If we could I just wanted to suggest one change, and that is in the header of this item. It's described as local government infrastructure plan, but what the thrust of this item really relates to is what I describe as infrastructure funding reform. And so if we could perhaps just rename that item as infrastructure funding reform, I think that would be helpful. Acting Mayor, Councillor Owen Jones pulled out item 6.5 for specific comment here today, which is our draft local government infrastructure plan version 2. We know what we need as a city in order to deliver on the reasonable and proper expectations of our community, but it comes at a significant cost. And we won't talk about it in a great deal of detail today because essentially the funding of the infrastructure plan is still a matter that significantly impacts on the local government budget, and so to that extent it is confidential. But what I will say is that the funding source for infrastructure is infrastructure charges, and where there's a shortfall, it's got to be met by the general rate. And it is absolutely critical that into the future we have a robust funding model and an ability to generate income that will provide us with the greatest opportunity to provide the infrastructure into the future that the city needs and wants. And so, Mr. CEO, I know you weren't at Planning Committee, we missed you. Feel free to join us anytime. But I think this is a matter which should spark some interest from you, because narrowing the gap between what we receive in infrastructure charges and the cost of the infrastructure into the future is something that we need to pay close attention to. And so that was one of the thrusts of this particular motion in terms of bringing forward a report. But more broadly, it's not just as simple as what the dollar figure of infrastructure charges are. It is about a broader sweep of potential reform. If we're going to go to the state government who tell us what to do with these infrastructure charges, we need to be able to say to them meaningfully that this is the suite of reforms that we want to see. And one of the things that Councillor Vorster has already mentioned in this meeting is the state making their fair share of contribution when they themselves are putting very high demand, growth-driven infrastructure into our suburban neighbourhoods and do not contribute to our local government infrastructure that is necessary to support it. So I look forward to this report coming forward, because we need to make sure that we are able to provide a sustainable funding model into the future so that we can deliver on the infrastructure that the city needs. So I hope that this earns my colleagues' support. I know that not everyone was at Planning Committee, but it is a very important piece of work for us to set the scene for how we move forward in funding LGIP 2.
And thanks, Councillor Caldwell. And I think it's important to note too that the Director and I have made representations at the SEQ planning workshops that are held with all South East Queensland mayors. We understand that we work within a framework of capped infrastructure charges, and we have most certainly tabled the need to increase the current level of funding that we can collect through infrastructure charges. But I'm totally supportive of what is being proposed here and think it's a great initiative, so well done. Councillor Young. We had a seconder, didn't we?
You seconded it. Oh, I didn't.
Yeah, I seconded that.
Right.
Thank you. Any other speakers? If not, we'll take the vote. All in favour? That is carried. Councillors, would you like to have a 10-minute break before we move on? If so, we'll take that break and resume in 10 minutes. Thank you. Live streaming on. Councillors, were there any other items on planning that you wish to discuss? If not, I'll go to Councillor Caldwell.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. I move that the remaining recommendations of the Planning and Environment Committee be adopted.
Seconded. Councillor Peter Young. All in favour? Carried. Thanks, councillors. We'll now move on to water and waste. Correct.
Good morning, Acting Mayor. I'd like to move that the report of the Water, Waste and Energy Committee held on Thursday, 3rd of March 2022, covering recommendations 1 to 4 be received.
Seconder, Councillor Pauline Young. All in favour? That is carried. Any items, councillors? Back to you, Councillor Hamill.
Madam Acting Mayor, move that recommendations of the committee be adopted.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Pauline Young. All in favour? That is carried. Thank you. That was a wasted journey. Okay, councillors, we'll go to governance. We'll just wait for the director to arrive. And I'll go to Councillor Owen Jones.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I move the report of the Governance Administration Finance Committee meeting held on Wednesday the 9th of March 2020, covered by recommendations 1 to 8 be received.
Seconded, Councillor Patterson. All in favour? Carried. Did you have an item you wished to raise?
No, I was going to move the remaining.
Are there any items, councillors? Please, Councillor Owen Jones.
So I move the recommendations of the Governance Administration Finance Committee be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Patterson. All in favour? That is carried. Thank you so much, Director.
Thanks for the shirt, Lee.
So, Councillor Tozer, due to Councillor Lacastra's absence, I'll go to you to move the reception of ETE.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I move that the report of the Economy, Tourism and Events Committee held on Wednesday 9th of March, covered by recommendations 1 to 5, be received. Was there 5?
Seconded. Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, is it 1 to 5 recommendations? Or is it 1 to 8?
1 to 8.
1 to 8, Madam Acting Mayor.
Thank you very much. I'll second Councillor Patterson and we'll take the vote. All in favour? That is carried. Any items, Councillor? Councillor Tozer.
I've had some advice from the officers in relation to item 7.1, which is a confidential item, but I think the only element to change is one of the resolutions, which is not inherently confidential. Unless there are other questions, I'd be happy to move the committee recommendation with the required change. If I'll leave it in your hands, Madam Acting Mayor.
Okay, councillors, do you have any other queries that might need us to go into closed? If not, I'll have Councillor Tozer move the change.
Was easy. Madam Acting Mayor, then I would move that the committee recommendation, with a slight adjustment to number 5. Do you need me to reread it, or are you happy?
As long as it's up on the screen. If you read out the change, has the change been
No, but
recorded?
I can read that out.
Yes, please.
So all of the items 1 to 4 and 6 remain the same, but item 5 should change such that it reads that the table in attachment 2 be corrected to replace the first reference to Carrara Indoor Sports Stadium to Gold Coast Squash Centre. Does that sound right to you? They're not the same. Are you, sorry, Madam Acting Mayor, I'm so sorry. The officer has provided this, but I'm not sure I think it aligns maybe with the officer recommendation as opposed to the committee recommendation. So let's retain 5 and let's change it that we include a 7. Yes. Yeah. It's almost as if the councillor's recommendation in committee didn't get thought about. But
Okay.
glad we've sorted that out.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Vorster. And please let me know if you would like to go into closed.
No. Madam Acting Mayor, just on, I think, part 4 of the recommendation, could I just get an understanding from the CEO whether the effect of 4 would last just a single budget cycle, or is this now an indefinite position that will be taken? Yeah, thanks.
I might ask the COO to answer that one.
My reading of it, it's an ongoing, effectively a policy position. So unless you change it at a future meeting or a budget process.
Madam Acting Mayor, perhaps through you to Joe. So would council be open to making adjustments in the budget process that may be different to essentially the articulated position?
I don't see any issue with that.
Okay, great. I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Could I just, is it confidential, Mr McCabe, to know what the level of funding is from what the profits are from?
Yes, it's rare, I'd say. Yes.
I mean, my understanding was that I don't think that is a very accurate description of what occurred at committee. My understanding was it was that the profit, it wasn't from any city events units activation, that it was from the markets. Yeah. And I'm sorry, that is not correct. So I would like to actually chip in here and suggest the removal of 4 or the replacement with 4 with that funding consideration for future events within Surfers Paradise be considered as part of the budget process. And we can look at... We've already got that there.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Sorry.
Actually, I meant to talk about the Surfers Paradise markets.
Okay,
not
I'm
broadly
sorry. When you said 4...
So I must have been having a look at the original recommendation then.
Well, I still kind of feel that it might be better to leave that for budget discussions. I don't know what the feeling of the room is, but I'll go to Councillor Owen-Jones.
So, Madam Acting Mayor, on page 65 there are some numbers and I'm not too sure if it's clear to councillors what the actual profits from the markets are after the payment of the management fee.
No, it's not.
So I appreciate that it's budgetary, so if I could move into closed so that we could get an answer to that so we can actually make an informed decision.
Thank you. And seconded, Councillor Young. All in favour? That is carried. Streaming off, please. and streaming's on, and I'll go back to Councillor Tozer to move the motion, which is seconded by Councillor Pauline Young.
Madam Acting Mayor, this motion involves a number of different elements that are, some of which the substance is contained on confidential papers. So not all of it can be explored in public because of the commercial nature of some of the and budget implications of some of what's discussed. But the substance of it is that, most importantly for the community, that we are doing a better job and intending to do a better job of understanding the contributions that businesses from all over the city make in order to stimulate our city as an events city. We are considering that carefully. We are analysing where that funding is coming from, and we are doing our very best to make sure the agents that we've put in charge of managing city events, whether they be small Christmas carol events or larger big music events like, you know, ones we're all familiar with like groundwater and such things, deliver an economic outcome and a community outcome that matters to our ratepayers and also to visitors who come into the city because we have such excellent events. There are a couple of elements in this motion that I think are particularly important to look at. Item 5 actually is not confidential and actually relates to an item earlier dealt with in the committee on the day we met. And it talks about the data that we're collecting in relation to spending habits of consumers who come into the city, both consumers who live in the city, but also consumers who come into the city from outside. And the council has struck an agreement with a large payments organisation, I think it's Visa, and what we're able to do with the information that we collect is we're able to identify by geography where spending occurs over a certain set of dates. And the important element of 5 is that we're going to be able to track when we have a major event where spending occurs, potentially as a result of that event. Not only can we work out where the money gets spent, but we can also work out where the person come from, where the person who is spending the money comes from, whether they're from inside the city or outside the city. What is important to remember for the consumer and for the people listening today is that we can't identify any individual in that information. The information is very generalised, but it can help us understand whether the economic stimulus that occurs as a result of an event originates from a Gold Coast-based person or a person from outside the city, and we're able to quantify that very specifically. Every one of our events should be reconciled against that data now that data is available to us, and this motion addresses that. There is more to do. There's no doubt there's more to do in our city when it comes to major events and small events, and we need to be better at delivering efficiency and productivity and making sure the events that we hold, whether they have small community outcomes in whatever suburb, Mudgeeraba or other places, or whether they have large economic aspirations like some of our larger music events and sporting events that we host. It's important that we get value for money for every ratepayer, and this motion takes another step towards us doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Tozer. Any speakers against? If not, I'll. Would you like to close? Okay, I'll take the vote. Those in favour? That is carried. Councillors, I would like 6.3 to be dealt with separately for a declaration, please, which was made at committee. So it should be on the screen. The item considered a music festival, and I have declared that I received a donation from Cross Promotions in 2014 and 15, but I'm seeking your permission to consider allowing me to remain in the room while any discussion and decision is made about the matter. So I'll turn it over to you for a procedural motion, if there is one. Councillor Tozer.
Madam Acting Mayor, I would, having been aware of your disclosure, I would move that that you should remain in the room and participate in the meeting in the public interest because, yeah, that one there, that's great. That's what I said at committee. I was trying to use the city solicitor's advice that I've finally brought into a council meeting, Madam Acting Mayor, and that is actually sufficient, and we'll go with that.
Thank you, Councillor Tozer. That's seconded by Councillor Young, and I'll take the vote and we'll call a division. Those in favour?
Councillor Hamill, Councillor Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Lumsden, Councillor Tozer, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Vorster, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor McDonald and Councillor O'Neill.
Against? Abstaining?
Abstained. Councillor Peter Young.
And could you note that I did not vote? Thank you. And that is carried. Would someone like to move 6.3? Councillor Owen Jones, seconded by Councillor Pauline Young. Any discussion, councillors? No? All in favour? That is carried. Sorry. Are there any other items, councillors? No other items? There's no notices of motion.
Oh, Madam Acting Mayor, should we move the other items?
Oh, haven't I done that?
Well, I believe we've done 6.3 and 7.1, but we may not have done the others.
No other items? Back to Councillor Tozer.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I move that the remaining recommendations of the Economy, Tourism and Events Committee be adopted, being items 1 to 6.2, and that'll do it.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Pauline Young. All in favour? That is carried. And now I can move on. So there's no notices of motion, no questions on notice. Any petitions, councillors? No petitions. General business. I'll go to Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Mayor. I provided some words to the Secretary. I'm happy to second the motion if perhaps Councillor Taylor would like to move it, but of course you're chairing the meeting.
I'm happy for you to sit down and Councillor Taylor move it.
Thanks, Madam.
And for you to stand, Councillor Taylor.
Yep, the words will be in here shortly.
It's going well so far.
You're killing it. Natural. Sorry, community. Sorry, I'm a doctor.
Could be.
Yeah, like Stephen Miles. Very.
Okay, that's going to be moved by Councillor Taylor and seconded by Councillor Vorster. Councillor Taylor, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, yes. And we want to bring a report back to full council that outlines a plan and funding model that activates Surfers Paradise, that's keeping with the community and the economic aspirations of our city. As we all know, Surfers Paradise, as we've grown as a city, was the heartbeat of the city, but we since now have grown into an amazing Gold Coast environment, which has amazing elements of the whole coastlines. But it's really important that we understand where it all started from and where it came from, and it's important that we do understand what's needed to ensure that Surfers Paradise is still a golden jewel on the Gold Coast, as well as all other areas of the Gold Coast foreshore and hinterlands.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Mayor. I just want to reflect on my experience with Surfers Paradise, and I'll begin with Herman Vorster, the New Zealand citizen who came to the Gold Coast. Yes, who came to the Gold Coast to visit quite frequently. And what's never been lost on me is that as a New Zealander coming to the Gold Coast, we never called it the Gold Coast. We always called it Surfers Paradise. We were going to Surfers Paradise. We might have been staying at Miami, we might have been staying at Main Beach, it didn't matter. We were coming to Surfers Paradise. The Surfers Paradise brand carries so much value. And I distinctly remember in about 2000, I would have been in about 1996, the greatest holiday we ever had was coming to the Gold Coast. And I distinctly remember looking up in our rental vehicle through a sky, you know, like, what do you call it? The hole in the car? The sky. Sunroof.
Window.
And looking at these amazing high rises against the black sky, and I thought to myself, just as a young kid, I was 11, that this is the most magical place ever. Councillor Taylor, to his credit, for 2 years has been talking about a new vision for Surfers Paradise, cleaning it up, putting in master plans, this, that and the other. And I must say through you to Councillor Taylor, I think you've had a lot of meetings, but you haven't had much traction. But today, the rubber's meeting the road. Today, the rubber meets the road. And I think you've got potentially the support of the full council to make sure that Surfers Paradise is absolutely the jewel in our crown and is restored to the position it needs to have in order for us to keep inducing visitors to our city and economic activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vorster. Councillors, there are no further speakers. If there's no further speakers, we'll take the vote. All in favour? That is unanimous. I think he would have too. Any other business? No other business, councillors? If not, I will declare the meeting closed at 12:33. Thank you, councillors.